A week after my son Matthew's wedding, my new daughter-in-law, Brooke, knocked on my door with a well-dressed man carrying a leather briefcase. "Mom, this is Paul, a notary," she said, flashing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We're here to help you with some house paperwork." My heart thudded, not from surprise, but recognition. I knew what they wanted. What they didn't know was what I'd quietly arranged in the months before, the ranch my late husband left me, and the safeguards I'd started building. Still, to explain how that knock became a turning point, I have to go back 3 months, to the day Matthew told me he was marrying her. I was in my kitchen, kneading dough, warm yeast rising under my palms. "Mom," Matthew said, wearing the grin that could melt me, "I want you to really understand Brooke before the wedding." "My son," I replied, wiping flour on my apron. "My only treasure has found love." I meant it. I wanted to. Brooke sounded perfect on paper. 32, office job, sleek brown hair, nails always polished. So I ran to the supermarket as if enthusiasm could guarantee harmony. I chose shrimp, ripe avocados, herbs, and heavy cream for chowder. I cooked Matthew's childhood favorites until my feet ached, telling myself love was a language, and mine had always been food. On the day she came, I put on my prettiest pink dress, fixed my hair, added lipstick. I opened the door, ready to welcome her with open arms. "Brooke, it's so nice to meet you." She didn't hug me. She barely brushed my shoulders, fingertips light as if contact might stain her. "Nice to meet you, ma'am," she murmured, eyes sliding past mine. Her green dress was elegant, her heels clicking across my modest floors like tiny hammers. At dinner, I tried, truly tried. I asked about her work, her hobbies, her plans with Matthew. Every question hit the same wall. Yes, no, maybe. She tasted my chowder like it was a test, not a meal, and her gaze kept roaming the room, measuring my home with quiet contempt. Matthew smiled too brightly and praised the food, as if compliments could patch what he pretended not to see. "Do you like cooking, Brooke?" I asked, hope stubborn in my throat. "I don't have time for that," she said. "I prefer ordering in or going to proper restaurants." Proper. The word lodged in my chest like a splinter. My food wasn't proper, my home wasn't either. After that, visits turned heavy. Brooke perched on the edge of my couch, phone in hand, acting bored by my existence. She didn't ask about my day. She didn't ask about Matthew's childhood. Once, while I poured coffee, she said lightly, "You'll be happy to have more time for yourself after we get married, right?" It sounded like an early goodbye, like she was already planning the distance she'd put between Matthew and me. Matthew just smiled, blind to my fear. Wedding preparations became a slow lesson in being erased. Brooke decided everything without asking me, as if I were a piece of furniture in my own family. I'd hear her on the phone saying, "Have the cleaning lady help with the flowers," and it took me a beat to realize she meant me, the one who always tidied and cooked when Matthew visited. When I offered to bake the wedding cake, a tradition in our family for generations, Brooke let out a laugh that chilled my blood. "Oh no, Mom. Let the professionals handle that. I don't want anything homemade." Homemade. She said it like a flaw, like love done by hand was something to be embarrassed by. That night, I cried in my kitchen, clutching the apron my mother had given me when I got married. My cakes had sweetened birthdays, graduations, baptisms. They carried memories in every layer, but to Brooke, they were just amateur. The wedding day arrived like a storm I couldn't stop. I woke before dawn and put on an elegant purple dress I'd bought just for the occasion. At the neighborhood salon, Carol pinned my hair so nicely I looked 10 years younger. "You look beautiful, Suzanne," she said gently. "Your son will be so proud." I held on to that tiny hope as I drove to the church early, wanting everything perfect for Matthew. Guests arrived, congratulated me, and I smiled until my cheeks hurt. Then the ceremony began, and I realized I'd been placed in the 5th row, behind Brooke's coworkers, behind neighbors who'd barely known Matthew, while the groom's mother sat in the back like a distant acquaintance. I swallowed the hurt, but something inside me cracked clean through. At the reception, Brooke introduced me over and over as Matthew's mom, never using my name, never saying my mother-in-law with any warmth. She cooks really well, she added with that bright, fake smile, reducing my whole life to a kitchen function. I waited patiently for the toasts. I had prepared words from the heart about the boy Matthew had been, about the man he'd become, about wishing him a marriage filled with patience and kindness. Brooke ran the microphone like a conductor, calling her parents. Siblings, best friends, even coworkers. Someone finally asked, "What about the groom's mother?" Brooke glanced at me and smiled thinly. "Oh yes, Miss Suzanne can say a few short words." Short, as if 30 years of raising my son could fit in a tiny corner of the evening. I stood, legs trembling under my dress. I want to thank God for this special day. I barely reached my second sentence when Brooke started clapping. Others followed automatically, and my voice vanished into applause that felt like a hand over my mouth. Dinner seating finished the job. They placed me at a back table with distant relatives who chatted past me as if I wasn't there. From that table, I watched Matthew laugh with his new family, absorbed in his new life, while I chewed chicken that tasted like cardboard. When the dancing started, Matthew danced with Brooke, then with her mother, then with her sisters. I sat smoothing my skirt, smiling until my face felt stiff. The song ended, and he never once turned toward me. Near 11 p.m., I finally walked up to him. "Son, I'm going to head out. I'm tired." I touched his arm lightly. He hugged me quickly, eyes already drifting back to the music. "Thanks for everything, Mom. I love you." Brooke appeared at his side like a shadow. "Thanks for coming, Mom," she said, and it sounded less like gratitude and more like dismissal. I walked to my car with shaking hands and burning eyes, feeling the truth settle heavy in my bones. In one night, I'd gone from being the center of Matthew's world to an inconvenience. The drive home felt endless. Highway lights smeared into soft streaks through my tears, and when I finally reached my house after midnight, the quiet inside it was so complete it seemed a swallow sound. I slipped off my shoes at the door and walked barefoot across the cold floor, the purple dress suddenly feeling ridiculous, like a costume worn by a woman pretending she still mattered. The next morning, the phone stayed silent. I told myself Matthew was busy, newly married, adjusting, but hours turned into days. A week passed. The silence wasn't an accident, it was a decision. I called him first. "Hi, son. How are you two? Was the honeymoon good?" I tried to sound cheerful, like the mother he used to call from school just to chat. "Great, Mom," he said, flat and hurried. "Brooke sends her regards. I'll call you later. We're busy sorting out the house stuff." The house stuff. Not my house. Not our old home. Just the house. Like it belonged to a category, not to me. 3 days later, I baked a batch of chocolate walnut cookies, his childhood favorite, because I needed an excuse that didn't sound like begging. I dressed neatly, tied the cookies in a basket with a yellow bow, and drove to their new place in Bellevue with hope rising in me despite everything. Brooke opened the door wearing a wine-colored silk robe that looked expensive, her hair pinned in a perfect bun. She looked like a woman prepared to host someone important, until she saw me. "Oh, Mom," she said, with the tone people use for unexpected delivery men. "What a surprise." "I brought cookies for Matthew," I said, holding up the basket like a peace offering. She took it without stepping aside. She examined the cookies like evidence. "How thoughtful. Matthew is in a very important meeting. I'll let him know." I stood in the doorway waiting for a simple invitation. "Come in, have a seat. How are you?" Anything. Brooke's hand stayed on the door. "Thanks for the cookies, Mom," she said. "Have a nice day." And then she closed it. Not gently, not apologetically. The door slammed like a verdict. Halfway home, I pulled over, gripped the steering wheel, and sobbed until my chest hurt. Anger came with the tears, hot and sharp. How had it become this easy to shut me out? How had my son, my Matthew, let someone treat me like a nuisance? That night, I ate dinner alone in front of the TV, barely tasting a thing. In the quiet between commercials, I remembered my late husband's voice, the last serious talk we had before he passed. "Suzanne," he'd said, If anything happens to me, don't let anyone trample you. You're stronger than you think, and you have more than you imagine." I'd nodded then, not fully understanding. Now, sitting alone with my hurt and humiliation, those words lit up like a lantern. The next morning, I went to the closet, pulled out the safe, and opened it with hands that were steadier than I expected. I laid everything out: birth certificates, marriage certificate, the house title, insurance papers. Then I found the envelope that made my breath catch, the deed to a ranch. Nearly 500 acres in eastern Washington. Land my husband had inherited. Land that now belonged entirely to me. The legal language was blunt and clear: sole owner, main house, worker homes, farmland, cattle operations, an appraisal high enough to change a life. But it wasn't just money that made my pulse race. It was power, the kind that meant I didn't have to beg for scraps of attention or accept being shoved aside. I put the deed back carefully, hid it even more securely, and made a choice. I would tell no one. Not Matthew. Absolutely not Brooke. That very week, Brooke started calling. Often. Not to invite me anywhere. Not to ask how I was doing. Her voice was syrupy, but her questions had teeth. "Mom Suzanne," she cooed, "don't you think you'd be more comfortable in a smaller place? This house must be such a responsibility at your age. At your age. Responsibility. Comfort." Every word wrapped like velvet around a knife. I kept my voice mild. "No, I'm comfortable here. This house holds too many memories." "Of course," Brooke replied, as if indulging a child. "But think about it. If you sold, you could travel, and we could help manage the money so it earns more." 2 days later, Matthew came by for the first time since the wedding. Not with warmth, not with stories, but with a purpose he couldn't quite meet my eyes to say. He sat on the sofa where he'd once slept, curled against me after childhood nightmares. He twisted his car keys in his hands like he was trying to rub courage into them. "Mom, Brooke and I have been talking about your future." "My future," I echoed, keeping my face calm even as my chest tightened. "We think this house is too big for you," he said. "You seem tired lately. Brooke knows a great agent who can appraise it. You could get a good price." The knife turned slowly. "Son," I asked, needing to hear it plainly, "do you really think I should sell?" For a moment, I saw the boy in him flicker, hesitation, guilt. Then he swallowed, and his voice came out scripted. "Brooke has a point, Mom. You should enjoy more, worry less." After he left, I sat in my kitchen with chamomile tea and a decision that finally settled like stone. I was done being managed. I called my oldest friend, Rachel. "Promise you won't tell anyone," I said. "I need you." Her voice went serious immediately. "Suzanne, what's happening?" I told her everything: Brooke's coldness, the wedding humiliations, the calls, the pressure. Then I told her about the ranch. Rachel went silent, then exhaled hard. "Thank God you kept quiet. Tomorrow morning we're seeing a lawyer." The attorney, Robert Hayes, had sharp eyes and a calm voice that didn't waste words. He listened, reviewed what I brought, and nodded slowly. "This pattern is common," he said. "Isolation, undermining confidence, then offering a solution that benefits the people applying pressure." Rachel squeezed my hand as if anchoring me to the chair. Mr. Hayes laid out a plan. Legal safeguards around my estate, strict instructions not to sign anything, and documentation of every coercive attempt. "If they push again," he said, "we record it. We do everything cleanly and legally, and you don't face them alone." A few days later, as if summoned by prophecy, Matthew and Brooke arrived together. Brooke carried a thick folder like a weapon wrapped in paper. They sat in my living room, the room where bedtime stories and toy cars used to live, and turned it into a courtroom. "Mom," Matthew began, using a tone that made my skin crawl, "we're worried about you. At your age, it's normal to feel overwhelmed managing finances." Brooke opened the folder and spread papers across my table, like a dealer laying down cards. "We talked to specialists," she said smoothly. "The best thing is simplifying your assets, selling the house, putting the funds somewhere safer." I read enough to see the trap: sell my home, move the money into a joint arrangement where they held control, and, worst of all, relocate me into assisted living for my safety. A facility, a place where I'd be out of the way. I acted the way they expected, letting my voice tremble. I need time to think." They smiled, satisfied. Brooke's sweetness sharpened. "Don't take too long. There's a wait list." That night, I barely slept. The next morning, Rachel brought me a small recorder and showed me how to use it. I practiced slipping it into my apron pocket until the motion felt natural. When Brooke called again, pressing for a quick decision, I spoke like a confused old woman. "Could you come tomorrow and explain it again? At my age, I forget." She practically purred with triumph. "Of course, Mom. We'll bring everything. This is best for everyone." The next afternoon, they returned, this time with Paul, the notary, and his leather briefcase. They laid out the documents and the gold-plated pen like an executioner setting tools on a table. I looked at the dotted lines. I looked at my son. I looked at Brooke's confident face. Then the doorbell rang. Rachel stood there with Attorney Hayes and an investigator ready to record. The color drained from Matthew's face. Brooke froze mid-motion. Paul snapped his briefcase shut too fast. Mr. Hayes stepped in calmly. "I represent Miss Suzanne. We're here to supervise this transaction," the investigator added, "and to document this meeting due to concerns of elder financial exploitation." The room went silent, thick as concrete. Brooke tried to laugh it off. "This is a misunderstanding. We're just helping." "Helping," I repeated softly, and for the first time in months my voice didn't shake. I placed the recorder on the table. By making me sell my house, taking control of my money and sending me to a facility? Then I opened my safe in front of everyone and set the ranch deed down like a final card on the table. The truth landed with a weight that made Brooke's mouth part in shock. Mr. Hayes read the appraisal figure aloud, millions upon millions. Matthew stared at me as if he'd never known who I was. Brooke's face tightened, not with concern, but calculation gone wrong. Paul tried to stammer. "Ma'am, that changes everything." "Yes," I said, steady now. "It does. Because I already chose who protects me." When they finally left, the house felt like mine again. Not because the walls changed, but because I did. I sat with Rachel and Mr. Hayes, safe in my own living room for the first time in months, and understood something with perfect clarity. Silence had protected me. But speaking up, at the right moment, with the right support, had saved me.